Welcome to all who are joining. We're going to give it just a couple minutes to ensure that everyone that's joining us for this discussion is able to join, and then we'll get underway. We've got quite a number of people joining from across the state, both to present here today and then also just to be part of the dialogue. So we're going to give it just a little bit more time and then we'll get underway. All right, I think we're going to get started. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Wade Crowfoot, and I'm our California Natural Resources Secretary. And you are tuning in to one of our Secretary Speaker series, where we bring big thinkers and leaders from across the state to talk about shared priorities and emerging topics. And today, of course, we're going to unpack the 30 by 30 movement, which is something that so many leaders are working on across California. So excited to jump in. Let me first of all say happy Pride. June is a time when we celebrate the incredible diversity we have across our agency and across California. A lot of what we'll talk about today is about protecting this world-renowned biological diversity or biodiversity that we have in California. And Pride is one of the months where we celebrate our cultural and individual diversity. So we're excited to do that. Along with our sister agency, the California Environmental Protection Agency, we have a shared program this month to celebrate. And the theme of that is be yourself and change the world. So we're excited to do that. Want to just, before we kick off, share with you how we operate these discussions. First of all, in the chat function of your screen, my colleague Geeta Chandra is going to be providing links, both on our speakers and their organizations and topics that come up. So if you can, open that chat function on your screen and you'll get various internet resources that you can click on as we're having a conversation. We also want to integrate your questions, your observations into the discussion. We're several hundred people in this discussion, so we can't have sort of a great big dialogue across everyone, but we do want to understand what questions you have for our panelists. So if you use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen, at any point you can offer a question that our panelists will see, and then we will take those questions on in the group discussion. So without further ado, I want to jump into our conversation here today. We obviously talk a lot in California and around the world about our climate crisis, the crisis of climate change. Folks talk less about this biodiversity crisis we have in terms of protecting this incredible richness of plants and animals and other life forms we have across the planet. California is actually one of the world's biodiversity hotspots, so says scientists. And so increasingly, the role of nature and environmental conservation is playing a more important role in the discussion around how do we protect our communities against climate change, and then how do we get the climate crisis under control, but also how do we stem biodiversity loss? Also, increasingly, there's been a reckoning around people and land and nature. How do we right historic wrongs with California Native American tribes and partner with tribes to steward our environment as they have for thousands of years? How do we use our environmental conservation movement to build more access so that all Californians can get out and enjoy nature? So these are sort of driving forces of our 30 by 30 effort. Now, some of you joining today are probably living this 30 by 30 movement and part of it, but many of you may be coming to this for the first time. So we're going to spend a little bit of time at the top of the discussion breaking down what is 30 by 30 and why do we think it's important in California. Today, we have a great set of speakers, including two of my colleagues, Dr. Jennifer Norris, who spearheads our 30 by 30 effort as our Deputy Secretary for Biodiversity and Habitat, and then our colleague, Jen Eckerly, who serves as our Deputy Secretary for Oceans and Coasts and the Director of our Ocean Protection Council. And Jen, as it were, are going to, at the top of this discussion, explain a little bit more about what 30 by 30 is and what's happening. We're also joined by key leaders across the state driving 30 by 30. We talk about this as a movement, and progress is made on the ground. So we're going to hear from some of these leaders, including Juan Rosas from the Hispanic Access Foundation, Annie Burke, who leads a broad coalition of groups working on this priority in the Bay Area called Together Bay Area. We have Chairman Joe Davis, who leads the Hoopa Valley Tribe, which is a federally recognized sovereign nation in Northern California, doing remarkable work on tribal sovereignty and conservation. We also have our colleague, Angie Avery, who is leading remarkably innovative work at the Sierra Nevada Conservancy. And then lastly, our colleague and friend, Dr. Steve Montfort, who leads the UC Natural Reserve System and also helps to spearhead a key network of leaders on biodiversity. So we'll hear from each of these folks and sort of at a high level on what's happening in their world on 30 by 30. But before we do that, we're going to turn to Jen Norris. Again, my colleague spearheading our 30 by 30 effort. Jen, it's exciting to be together. We're both in the same building in Sacramento, headquarters building, just down the hall from each other. Huge thanks to you and your team for getting us this far, including the release of an annual progress report that you'll talk about. So if you would, Jen, just break down for us, what we're talking about when we're discussing 30 by 30.
Yeah, so thanks, Wade, and thanks to everybody for being here. I'm going to say this as many times as I can through my presentation that 30 by 30 is all about partnerships. So having these partners here today just makes me so happy, and it's an opportunity to showcase the great work that's going on. So just 30 by 30 at the highest level, we could unpack this for multiple webinars, which we've already done. But just real quickly, 30 by 30 is next slide, James, is California's commitment to conserve 30% of our lands and coastal waters by 2030. And this commitment was made in October of 2020 by executive order by Governor Newsom. And as far as we know, we're the first country or subnational on the planet to make this bold commitment. Next slide. And we are also the first, for sure, I know this, to put out a strategy to figure out where we are on that progress towards 30% and put out a strategy for how we're going to get that done. And we're really proud of our Pathways to 30 by 30 document. I'm going to walk you through just some pieces of this, but I really want to encourage you to take a look at it. It's not super long. It's pretty easy to access, and it will talk about things that I don't have time to talk about here today. But top level, next slide. We lay out, and the secretary just alluded to some of this, sort of what we're trying to do and how we want to do that work. So we want to conserve land and coastal waters across California to protect and restore this important biodiversity, the building blocks of the ecosystems that make life possible on Earth. That's the core value that drives 30 by 30. But we also want really to expand access to nature and all of its benefits like clean air, clean water, refuge from the heat, to all of California, and really use our conservation agenda to meet that need. And at the same time, use our lands and waters to draw down more carbon, keep more carbon in the soil and in the species that use it, but also use it to buffer ecosystems and our communities to the effects of climate change. And then we want to do this work with justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in mind at all times, making sure that more voices are brought to the table, that decisions are made in an inclusive way. We want to strengthen our tribal partnerships, look for opportunities to learn from our tribal partners on how to co-steward and manage those lands, but also give land back whenever we can. And finally, we want to demonstrate, as California does, that we can do all these things and advance our economic prosperity, our clean energy agenda, and be the breadbasket to the world. So we really believe that this framework sets the stage for the important work we want to do. Next slide, please. Defining what you mean when you're counting to a number is actually the most important and probably has been the most difficult part of our 30 by 30 agenda. This is our definition, and I will say that we're getting a lot of credit for having something that's very strong. Our definition of what counts towards 30% are land and coastal water areas that are durably protected and managed to sustain functional ecosystems, both intact and restored, and the diversity of life that they support. So we want durable protections, and we want biodiversity to be at the forefront. Next slide. And this encompasses a fairly broad range of lands and water areas across the state. So this is the dedicated conservation areas that you would think of, like national parks and wildlife reserves, but also many of our recreational lands and open spaces meet this definition, as well as a broad suite of working lands, both forests and grazing lands, where biodiversity conservation is married with economic development in a sustainable way. And then our incredible marine protected area network across our coastline meets our current definition. And Jen will talk a little bit more about that when she speaks. But we also emphasize that all conservation across California is important. We have these 30% that's sort of a special kind of conservation, but important work to protect biodiversity, to address climate change, and to give access to nature happens on many other lands as well. Given this definition, we're now at almost 25%. We're getting close. So we have about 5.5 million acres to go on land, and about 500,000 acres. We're at 16% of coastal water, 500,000 acres of coastal waters to meet our definition by 2030, and we think we're well on our way. Next slide, please. So all of these great things that I just talked about got us incredible recognition on the global stage. In December of last year, we went to Montreal, where 190 countries around the world made the similar commitment to conserve 1/3 of the planet by 2030. It was incredibly inspiring, and we were very proud to be part of that conversation and really show others that this can be done. Next slide, please. And in May of this year, we released our first annual progress report, showcasing success stories across all the different work we want to do. We have 10 pathways of ways we can get to 30%, from everything from acquiring more land, putting more easements on, working with our federal partners to enhance conservation on their lands, as well as the important research and partnership work that has to be done. So we showcase that in this report. I think that'll be put in the chat as well, a link to that. And I encourage you to check that out. Some really inspiring stories from partners. And we added 631,000 acres of land just this past year to our total. Next slide, please. As I said at the top, all of this is really about partnership. And if you're listening now, and this is the first time you've heard about 30 by 30, I want to encourage you to join us. We really draw from a suite of existing organizations. So if you're part of one of those and you're excited about 30 by 30, you're part of us. But then we have a broad 30 by 30 partnership where we bring together people in webinars like these, but also we're having an annual convening where we'll share best practices and lessons learned and stories of success. So I'm excited about this webinar because this bubble diagram just represents the existing organizations that we draw from, and we're going to hear from some of those today, the Biodiversity Network, OPC in a minute, and Annie's representing our regional work groups and coalitions. And I'll just say we have a partnership coordinating committee, and Juan's going to hopefully mention that. He sits on that too, that helps us keep all these moving parts going to get 104 million acres to be thinking about conservation across that landscape. It requires partners everywhere. And so we're excited to have you join us. And I'll turn it over to Jen to talk more about land and coastal waters. Excuse me. Thanks, Wade.
Thanks so much, Jen. Over to you, Jen Eckerly.
Thank you so much, James. I can take the next slide. And I'm just going to very briefly go over how we're doing this for coastal waters. So the Ocean Protection Council is serving kind of as the lead for implementation of our 30 by 30 initiative in coastal waters. And we're serving that role because the ocean is a public trust resource that belongs to all of us, and it just kind of lends itself to a more decentralized approach. So we really want to, a centralized approach, excuse me. And so we really want to serve kind of as the connection point for everyone who's interested in this effort for our coast and ocean. So we've got 4 different strategies that we're advancing. for this purpose. One, you heard Jen talk about our globally renowned network of 124 marine protected areas that's covering 16% of state waters. We just finished the first decadal management review of those MPAs. They're showing benefits for ocean health, and we are in the process of understanding kind of next steps on how we adaptively manage the network to even further meet the goals of their purpose. The other second strategy is really looking at our opportunities to strengthen biodiversity protections within national marine sanctuaries. And we've been partnering with the superintendents and leadership at national marine sanctuaries to figure out next steps on that piece. Third, we are pursuing opportunities to create Indigenous marine stewardship areas. And these are places that will increase and enhance tribal stewardship and co-management of our coastal and ocean resources. And we're doing that in close partnership and tribally led. And finally, we are looking at complementary conservation measures. So these are places in the ocean, like areas that have been set aside to protect water quality, potentially existing fisheries management closures. How are those places potentially contributing to the definition of conserved in 30 by 30 in that they're durable and they're providing ecosystem level benefits? So we have a lot of work happening in all of these strategies, and we're excited to share more soon. Next slide, please. And with that, these are the two websites where you can track what is happening more broadly on 30 by 30, that second link, and specifically for coastal waters on the OPC link. Thank you.
Jen, thanks so much. It took me a little while to understand the difference between state waters and federal waters. So can you remind us what we're talking about around the coastal waters that are in state jurisdiction?
Yeah, so that's 3 miles from our shoreline offshore is state waters.
Got it. Thank you so much. And we can unpack a little bit more about what's happening to grow our percentage of protected or conserved areas from 16% in just a little while. I will make an important point that Jen Norris made, or I'll emphasize it, which is 30 by 30 is not an end. It's not the sort of end goal. We think it's a really important thing to do to protect biodiversity, expand access and connection to nature, and combat and adjust to climate change. But there's so much more that has to happen, including things like wildlife crossings, wildlife connectivity, specific protections of endangered species. All sorts of things have to happen. But the fact is that we know that restoring natural habitat, protecting intact habitat is really important, both for people and for non-human life forms. And that's really what's driving the work. I'm so excited that what California has been doing now for almost 3 years has sort of caught fire across the world. And I do think California is in a leadership role. And if we can get it right and show how to do this effectively and with the kind of partnerships we're aiming to develop, we'll show the world what can happen. And again, Jen referenced almost every country of the world is signed up on paper for 30 by 30. So it's California's opportunity to show the world how we can do it. And among those leading the way is Juan Rosas. Juan helps to lead the work at the Hispanic Access Foundation. And as Jen mentioned, he's one of our partnerships coordinating committee members, essentially leading efforts to ensure that we're outreaching to all the groups and leaders working on 30 by 30. So Juan, welcome. If you would, tell us a little bit about Hispanic Access Foundation and why you and your organization are investing as much time and energy in 30 by 30 as you are.
First and foremost, thank you, Mr. Crowfoot, Dr. Norris. It's a huge blessing to be able to walk alongside this amazing project to conserve 30 by 30 here in California. It's no secret, Mr. Crowfoot, that the Hispanic community is one of the largest populations here in California. So to be able to bring awareness to the Hispanic community is the passion of Hispanic Access Foundation. I'm a conservation program associate with Hispanic Access Foundation. If you can put up the first slide. And I'd definitely love to share the wonderful work that we're doing here at Hispanic Access Foundation. I'm part of the conservation team, and I love that I'm also a California native. I'm born and raised in California, and I see myself living here for the rest of my days. But the Hispanic community in California, it's important to engage them, because it's no secret that the Hispanic community is a hardworking community. It's no secret, it's evident. And most of the Hispanic community here, as we see a lot of the agriculture is coming out of California, we see the Hispanic community being one of the leaders in working in that area. But unfortunately, that equates for us bad quality of water due to all the pesticides that pollute our waters. And when we see these dramatic wildfires due to climate change, it affects the air that they're breathing as they're working outside. We know the Hispanic community has also been a really hardworking in the ports and the factories here in California that's leading the economy for our nation. But unfortunately, they live in very polluted areas where smog and just asthma is huge in the Hispanic community. So here at the conservation team, we're trying to focus on making sure that they have clean water to drink, clean air to breathe. And also one of our passions is to get the next generation and everyone outside. We know the benefits of going outside. We know the benefits for our mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health to go outside. Unfortunately, a lot of our Hispanic communities are living in the inner city where they don't have access to green space. So here at Hispanic Access Foundation, we're fighting hard to make sure that the immediate Hispanic community and everyone has access to green space, clean, safe, clean space for their recreation, for mental, physical, and spiritual health. If you can go to the next slide, please. So here's our vision, is to connect Latinos with partners and opportunities to improve lives and create an equitable society. Our vision is for one day every Hispanic individual in America will enjoy good physical health, a healthy natural environment, quality education, economic success, civic engagement in their communities, with the sum of improving the future of America. If you can go to the next slide. Here is our team. You're more than welcome to reach out to any of us. You can go to hispanicaccess.org. Under staff, you can see the conservation team, and we're here to serve. Next slide. We also use our toolkits to educate our communities, because our heart, you know, a lot of these people that are on this call, they know what conservation, they understand it, they know the science, they know the data, but not everyone in the media community knows that. So our job is to educate the community. And how we do that, we give financial resources, educational resources, and an equal opportunity for our Hispanics to meet their elected officials. We have 3 main networks that are under the conservation team. The first one is the Latino Climate Council, which is a young group of young professional, young environmentalists that are focused on climate change. Then we have our Olas y en Acción, Waves in Action, which is a group of ocean conservation. And then we have our largest one, which is Por la Creación, PLC, for its creation, which is a group of faith leaders all across the nation that are helping protect God's creation. I'd like to elevate PLC for a second and maybe make the bridge of why we use faith leaders. And if I can be really transparent, and I say this with a lot of respect to all our state agencies that are doing phenomenal work, but when you go to the immediate community, that you go into El Barrio, a lot of the Hispanic community does not trust government. Here at Hispanic Access Foundation, we're working very hard to change that narrative, but that is the reality. And so with that said, we know that the Hispanic community trusts their pastors, their priests, their imams, their faith leaders that are there working with their food banks, and they're there with their funeral, doing the funeral services for the community. So we know that the Hispanic community really trusts those leaders. So here we at Hispanic Access Foundation, we connect with our PLC faith leaders so they can connect with their state electives, and they can go in front of their representatives on behalf of their community, and also re-educating the community that they can trust government, and they're there to serve one another. So that is the little of Hispanic Access and what we do. Please write me an email. You can give me a phone call. You can send a pigeon if you don't have any of those access. I'd love to connect with everyone. Thank you so much for the time.
Juan, I think you're doing double duty because you're a faith leader and part of that Por la Creación network as well. Talk to me about the last year. You know, you've been on this partnership coordinating committee. It's all about trying to build 30 by 30 into a movement. You know, what's your take on how it's going?
Oh, first and foremost, it's been an incredible journey being led by an incredible leader under Dr. Norris. We have currently 16 leaders that are part of the PCC. And I, first and foremost, I'm humbled because I'm learning every day alongside them. And the group mainly focus is to spread the good news of 30 by 30. We want to, again, I will repeat, a lot of people on this call know the importance of conservation, but I want the Cholo in East LA to know the importance of conservation. So our job is to make sure that we bring awareness that everyone and their mamas know the importance of preserving 30 by 30. And like you've already mentioned, and Dr. Notice already has mentioned the fact that 30 by 30 is not the end. I really believe it's the start. And as we know, California is one of the most, if anything, I do believe it is the most diverse state of the whole nation, where this is a melting pot of so many different cultures. It's really important that we get 30 by 30, the good news of 30 by 30 amongst this cultural diverse state that we live in.
Yeah.
Also, another really important passion of mine is, you can see a lot of gray hairs on my beard. So it is important that once we hit our 30 by 30 goal, we start immediately focusing on what's next. So our heart right now is to bring up and raise up the newest, the young environmentalists, get anyone information so we can then pass the mantle and we can continue to protect our amazing resources, our natural resources here in California.
That's awesome. And as we've talked about in the last year, we've added over 600,000 acres of land to this, 30%, which is remarkable. I think it's 100 square miles. And, some of those projects are expanding access to people that don't have them. And so just driving that priority within our effort, Juan, is critically important. So huge thanks to you. We're going to loop you back into the group conversation. I next want to introduce Annie Burke. And as I mentioned, Annie leads Together Bay Area, which is one of these regional collaborations that's driving progress on the ground. 30 by 30 is not a centrally planned exercise from Sacramento or Washington, D.C. It's really about local conservation leaders making progress. So Annie, welcome. Talk about, if you would, what is Together Bay Area, and then how does the work reflect what may be happening across the state?
I'd be happy to. And if we could start the slides, that would be great. Thank you so much, Secretary Crowfoot, for inviting me and Together Bay Area to be a part of this. It's a total honor, and it's a lot of fun to be alongside these fellow panelists. I'm also just really honored to serve on the Partnership Coordination Committee along with Juan. So thank you for those opportunities. I'm here on behalf of Together Bay Area. I'm one person, but Together Bay Area is many. So I just want to shout out to my team, my board of directors, and all of the member organizations who are here today or who are watching this later. There's a lot of people involved with Together Bay Area, and I am just one. So I'm here to talk about pathway number one, which is the regional coordination pathway. And I want to share with you 3 things that are happening here in the Bay Area that support that pathway and have benefits at both the local, regional, and state levels. Next slide, please. So first, just to set some groundwork, Together Bay Area is a regional coalition of 70 plus member organizations. Those are nonprofits, Native American-led organizations and public agencies. We're in the 9 counties of the Bay Area. The slide says 10 because we include Santa Cruz County in that too. Those mountain lions don't know the difference between Santa Clara County and Santa Cruz County. So we bring Santa Cruz right on into the Bay Area. And our members are working for healthy lands, healthy people, and healthy communities. I invite you to learn more about us at our website. I won't go into all the things that we're doing. I really want to highlight 3 things as they connect to 30 by 30. Next slide, please. The first is that we asked our members to what kind of projects they have or they could have, if given funding, to expand access, build climate resilience, and protect biodiversity. We didn't know actually how many they would come back, how many they would share. We didn't know, 25, 30, and we were blown away to see 117 projects that are ready to implement those 3 objectives of the Pathways to 30 by 30 strategy. Not only are they doing, some of these projects are doing all three of the objectives. They're in all of the counties, they're in all of the legislative districts. And I invite you to go learn more by going to that link, and where you can search by native lands, county, district, type of project. It's really an inspiring thing to go look at these projects and see all of the good work that's happening. It's really, when you're feeling a little blue, this is a great thing to go do and feel some hope. Another thing I want to share is the next slide, is that some of the work that we're doing to increase capacity here in the region for alliances between Native and non-Native led organizations and tribes, communities, groups. The leadership from Governor Newsom and Secretary Crowfoot is just inspiring. The formal apology on behalf of state of California and so much more that is happening under Secretary's leadership is really having an impact both at the regional and local levels. Our members are all doing something small or big to increase their capacity and to return land, to build power, to transfer power, knowledge and resources to local Native American tribes. There's so much good work that's happening here. We just completed a pilot program in our partnership with Native-led organization Redbud Resource Group to increase, to catalyze collective action for local Native American communities. It's just really exciting stuff. And I encourage you to go to that link and find out more about what we're doing there. And the third thing I want to highlight is the next slide, is our Conservation Lands Network. This is a set of habitat goals for biodiversity conservation that started in the early 2000s. It's a really close partnership between the Together Bay Area and the State Coastal Conservancy, along with the Subtidal and Bayland Habitat Goals projects. It's a set of goals, but it's also a set of maps and tools that anyone can use to advance their local projects. And the partnership with the State Coastal Conservancy is really key to both for the local practitioners, also for state, for regional impact. And then of course it connects into 30 by 30 goals at the state level too. So that is what I have to share with you now. And I look forward to the conversation in a few minutes with all of the panelists. Thank you again.
Thank you, Annie. I love the tagline of that strategy, think big and connect more.
Yes.
Really awesome. And I should have mentioned, huge leaders in this effort are our California legislators. They have championed 30 by 30 from the get-go and have, along with the governor, allocated a historic amount of money through state agencies for projects. So part of the work, Annie, that you're doing is helping players in your region, whether they're land trusts or resource conservation districts or cities, counties, position themselves for that funding. Right. And part of what we're trying to do in Sacramento is continue to provide that funding for these projects. So huge thanks. And, Annie spotlighted the Bay Area, and there's other regional collaborations that are happening in other parts of the state that are really about delivering these projects. Because at the end of the day, all physical conservation is local, and that's really the leadership that we need. So big thanks. It's next my honor to introduce Chairman Joe Davis, who leads the Hoopa Valley tribe here in California, which is a sovereign nation in what we know as far northern California. Chairman, first of all, welcome. And second of all, thank you for all you're doing on building your tribe's sovereignty in ways that work with our state government to protect the environment. If you would, just share a little bit about all the good work that's happening in Hoopa Valley.
Thank you so much, Secretary Crowfoot. It's an honor for me to be not only part of these efforts and the 30 by 30, but also to be amongst so many great partners today, fellow stewards of the land, people like yourself and the folks that you work with from the legislator. I mean, it's very much appreciated. Just a little bit about us at the Hoopa Valley Tribe. We're actually the largest land-based tribe in California. Our reservation is about 92,000 acres. Of that, about 88,500 is forest land. And so we actually only occupy probably about a fifth of our original Aboriginal territory. However, We have about 3,600 tribal members, so we're the third largest tribe by population. As tribal people, you know, we've always depended heavily upon the land and the water. You know, to have healthy ecosystems is really extremely important for the health of our people. We've always tied our own health and physical, spiritual well-being with the health of the lands and the ecosystem. So it's critically important for us with regards to maintaining our way of life, our identity, and probably perhaps most importantly, our health. And so again, these projects are extremely important to us. We've done a lot with regards to the Trinity River Restoration Program. As you know, Secretary, probably around 1959, the dams went in on the Trinity River to divert water south. Since that time, it's been a huge undertaking by our tribe and other partners to restore the fishery. It really devastated the landscape, the habitat. And so there's been a tremendous amount of work put into that to restoring salmon spawning habitat, particularly the gravel at the bottom of the streams, but also the tributary streams as well. And so we've been funded by the State Fish and Wildlife Service to help, restore some of the salmon habitat in the Trinity River watershed. We also do a lot with CAL FIRE. Working with our state partners there, we received a grant to treat 1,415 acres for fuels reduction, also sudden oak death remediation. So we depend heavily upon the oak tree. Of course, our areas have been devastated by fire in the past. So being able to get ahead of some of that and do remediation work has been really excellent for us. CAL FIRE was so pleased with our project that they decided to award us an extra $350,000 on top of the original grant, which allowed us to treat an additional 147 acres. And this included some traditional prescribed burning on the lands, areas that hadn't seen that in over 100 years. And so to be able to not only remediate fire danger, but also build up our cultural resources to have healthier forest stands, healthier oak production, whether that be the acorns that we've depended heavily upon from those oak trees or the mushrooms that we harvest in those areas. It's really been excellent, not only for our physical health and the ability to get out and practice our culture, but also to keep people employed, and that's leads to healthier families as well. So that's been much appreciated. We also do a lot of similar work with the U.S. Forest Service, as well as I'm drawing a blank here, the other agency, Bureau of Land Management. We've done a lot of similar work there. It's not only been treatment of the lands, but also increasing that access, for local folks to go in and access those areas. Also working with the federal EPA on a cleanup of an old mining site. I'm not sure who it was that came into our reservation in the late 50s and were harvesting heavy metals, copper, zinc, different things, and really left it a mess. And so that up, it'll be really good for the Trinity River and everybody that visits those areas. That will be helpful. Also, I want to mention the work that we do for the Pacific fisher, the mountain lions, and the alarming amounts of pesticide that we found in the communities. By being able to track these animals and see the foods that they're eating and how those are affected by pesticides, it's allowed us to try to work with the County of Humboldt and others to reduce the amount of marijuana grows that come in, better enforcement on those grows where they're not using pesticides. And I'm just really proud of our fisheries department and our forestry department, all of our natural resources departments that do this excellent work. In fact, we were recently awarded a grant by the California Coastal Conservancy to purchase 10,300 acres in our Aboriginal territory. This will allow us to expand that excellent work, whether that be for fire remediation, protection of the Pacific fisher, the northern spotted owl, we mentioned mountain lions, all those types of things, as well as the salmon spawning habitat that's within that watershed of Pine Creek. So we really appreciate the support of the state of California in those efforts. It will allow us to further that work in an area of our ancestral homeland that we have not had access to for over 100 years. And so we're
that is amazing.
excited about that. And we thank the state of California for that. We've gotten a lot of support from the Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as our elected officials as well. We've received letters of support from Senator McGuire, Assembly Member Wood, Assembly Member Ramos. And so we're extremely appreciative of all that support from the state of California. You guys have been great partners, and we're looking to move forward and continue these efforts alongside the Wildlife Conservation Board as well.
Wow. Well, your tribe's leadership is such a powerful example of why we need to deepen partnerships between federal, state, local government, and tribal government. You know, you all and other Native American tribes across California have been taking care of the environment since time immemorial. And, you know, as Annie mentioned, one of the things I'm most proud about is our reflection on that and our commitment to learning from our tribal partners and providing collaboration, support, resources, particularly to less resource tribes to actually do this work, both get land back and then to formally co-steward resources. I'm so glad you brought up rivers and aquatic habitat. 30 by 30 is helpful on that front by protecting and restoring watersheds, but we also know that things like restoring flows into rivers is critically important. So excited about that 10,000 acres that you're going to get back under sovereign control. We're so eager to add that to the acreage that will fall into 30 by 30. So just huge thanks. I'll also mention that for others that may be wondering if the state is working on other partnerships with tribes, the answer is yes. And we're really proud that very soon, most likely this year, we will have available a program called the Tribal Nature-Based Solutions Program, which is directly using state funding, transferring it to tribes for land back projects and for stewardship projects. That's going to be in the amount of $100 million. It's the first of its kind, we think, in the country, and it's going to enable many more of these projects. So huge thanks, Chairman Davis. I want to next introduce Angie Avery. Angie, you lead our Sierra Nevada Conservancy, one of 10 state conservancies. The goal of our state conservancies is really to be those grounded partners in different parts of California, getting good work done to advance state priorities. So talk about what you're doing to advance 30 by 30 and how it's going.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me here today, Secretary Crowfoot. We're sort of that on the ground partner for the state of California. We consider ourselves regionally focused. We are regionally focused, and we do everything that we do with an ear both to what's happening on the ground and to state goals. And so when the state advanced 30 by 30, Sierra Nevada Conservancy was really excited because what 30 by 30 was for us was a statewide commitment to one of the core regional goals of our watershed improvement program, that regional goal being strategic land conservation. The strategies and the pathways and the actions that are laid out in the 2030 conservation goals align so closely with the work that we're striving to complete and to support throughout the region that we serve. Equity, justice, diversity, and inclusion, strengthening tribal partnerships, sustaining economic prosperity, agricultural productivity, and ecological health. Those are all things that we work towards on a daily basis under the Watershed Improvement Program. Beyond that, and beyond just land acquisition, our work really does support the ecological health and resilience of the forested watersheds that make up much of the land that we serve. And a key foundation to the Watershed Improvement Program really is forest and watershed health, without which, if those we all know that the Sierra Nevada, like other parts of the state, is experiencing significant fire. And so our goal is to make sure that those watersheds stay healthy. And I should have said, please start the slides. I apologize. And so our goal really is under the Watershed Improvement Program to ensure that our forests and watersheds are healthy, so that we can achieve the other state goals, like the goals and pathways outlined in 30 by 30. Next slide, please. So in the last couple of years, I wanted to highlight some of what we've been hearing about and how we're working in our region. So in the last couple of years, we partnered really closely with some of the tribes on 3 separate land back projects that are going to restore tribal ownership of culturally and ecologically significant sites to tribes and ancestral homelands to tribes. So a couple of pictures here. The top one is the Kolo Kam Ap project in Kern County is going to transfer land back to the Tuba Tulabal tribe. The significance of this project is that this is an important wetland stop for migratory birds. So what will happen when this project gets transferred, it's a 1,200 acre acquisition, of which half will go back to the tribe. Western Rivers Conservancy will manage the rest. But this is basically going to put this land under tribal stewardship, and we're really excited to see it happen. We've got another project that is not shown here, but it is a project in the Greenville Rancheria area of Plumas County. We all watched, and so I would imagine, horror as the 2021 Dixie Fire burned through the town of Greenville. But an impact, it had some pretty severe impacts on the Greenville Rancheria. We're going to return 53.5 unburned acres. It's going to transfer from industrial timber company ownership back to tribal ownership. Super excited about this project. Number one, because the land is unburned, but number two, because it creates an opportunity to look at tribal-led restoration, the use of cultural burning, using seeds and seeding culturally important plants, creating opportunities for wildland fire training for California tribes, cultural education, and sort of returning ceremonial grounds to the folks that have been there since time immemorial. The third project that we're super excited about is a Tubinobi project down in Mono County near Mono Lake. Our board just awarded this project in March, and it's basically going to transfer 160 acre parcel back to the Kutsadika tribe, the Mono Lake Kutsadika tribe. And what's really, I think, significant about this, we did this in partnership with the Eastern Sierra Land Trust, but what's really, I think, important to this is these tribes have no lands. They are a landless tribe, and that the transfer of this property, which includes infrastructure and houses, and not houses, but facilities that they can use for tribal gatherings, is that this will be a first step or an important step in their process to be federally recognized. And it creates a land base for them to conduct traditional ceremonies and preserve cultural heritage, and really to start utilizing traditional knowledge for land stewardship. Next slide, please. And lastly, there's another project that our board just awarded in March, and this is called it's the Tahoe Forest Gateway I'm not going to say this properly, Liedersdorf project. And this was an acquisition project of 650 acres in the Highway 80 corridor. And what's super interesting about this project from our perspective is that the acquisition is supporting the 40-acre Conservation League. For those who don't know, the 40-acre Conservation League is the first and only state Black-led conservancy that really is being was formed to effectuate dual goals of acquiring idyllic lands for conservation and then facilitating meaningful, inclusive public access for people of color, for people of lower economic, socioeconomic levels who really haven't had an opportunity to experience the Sierra Nevada or our forests in any kind of meaningful way. And so the planning is just underway for this project. They are really thinking about what does a recreation experience look like And then how do you manage the forest to support and make sure the forest is healthy to host those folks? But what does it look like for people who maybe don't have as much exposure to wooded recreational experience? So that's some of the newer projects that we've been focusing on. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them, Secretary Crowfoot.
Thanks so much. I mean, I think those examples just indicate, and they're meant to indicate, just how many good things are happening across the state, being driven by local groups, whether they're state conservancies or other local tribal governments, land trusts, RCD, so much progress happening. We're going to round out our conversation by bringing Dr. Steve Montfort on. And as I mentioned, Steve leads the UC Natural Reserve System. And importantly, Steve, you are helping to lead the California Biodiversity Network, which is a set of scientific experts that's working in very close collaboration across the state on 30 by 30. Talk a little bit about that work, if you would.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot. And it really is an honor to be here with an esteemed panel and some friends. Could I have the first slide, please? The only slide. This is the, I want to introduce you to the California Biodiversity Network. The website is listed here. And functionally what this group is, it's a group that has come together of biodiversity scientists and land stewards and others that are biodiversity focused for knowledge sharing. And ultimately what we're trying to do is to connect practitioners with the latest research to make informed decisions about managing for biodiversity and supporting 30 by 30. As one of the goals of the group, we created Appendix D, which is really the science to support 30 by 30. So it's a kind of a blueprint for what's needed. And the way that this document is organized is under this, shown in this Venn diagram, but it's these round tables. There's these 4 round tables. And fundamentally, those round tables are focused on research, but not just, a lot of it is focused on biodiversity data, how we're going about collecting the data, what data exists, and how we can go about utilizing that. So things like biodiversity informatics and community science, for example, how do we bring also working lands into the equation for sustaining biodiversity? And ultimately, how do we create the ability to manage or to assess biodiversity at scale and across the entire state? And I'll mention the Sentinel Site Network in a moment. But the other flip side is that we're really focused also on stewardship. And an overarching theme of our group is also equity. So there are a number of workshops that are planned for later this year. There's one going to be on Indigenous co-stewardship of public lands in October. We're going to also be having a science piece of a science CBN science update at your annual meeting that CNRA will be hosting. And there's some white papers that we're going to be producing that will explain some of the work that we're doing. In terms of the data information, right now, if you look at this, the chart here on the right, it's really a map with these dots that show different partners in what we're calling a climate biodiversity sentinel site network. And so, Mr. Secretary, you have 42 sites within CDFW that are coming online. The NRS has 41 sites around the state, represented in those orange dots. And then we have partnership sites like the Nature Conservancy, Pepperwood Preserve, and others. And what we're fundamentally there trying to do is to have the ability to assess biodiversity in real time, so that over time we can understand where does biodiversity exist currently in space and time, and how we can go about using information translated for data products that can help make better decisions. I'll use a medical analogy. It's very sexy to be, I guess, a cardiologist or a heart surgeon. Not so interesting always to be a general practitioner or an internist. When you go to your doctor and you get your checkup, they get a whole set of tests and they get your baseline. And maybe 2 years later, you come back and they tell you that you have to change your diet or have better exercise and so on, so that you will avoid ultimately having a heart problem. In this case, we're trying to create a benchmark, something we can understand. Where are we today? so we can measure how our interventions are working over time. I have a trash truck in the background, so my apologies for that. And we're trying to avoid going to the emergency room and having heart surgery here. But right now, when you have a fire or you have a prolonged drought and you want to know how much biodiversity exists or remains in an area that was affected, we're not able to give you that information with great accuracy. So we want to change that by creating this Sentinel site network that will really help us understand patterns over time. And then finally, on the stewardship front, we manage a lot of land. We want to figure out how can we do better co-management, provide access to our land when appropriate, create stewardship plans together, especially with our tribal nation partners, and also finding pathways for young people to find a space in nature for a career. And we think we can be a gateway and a workforce multiplier for that. So if you're interested, please reach out to that website. You can sign up for a roundtable and get involved with us. We'd love to have you join.
Thanks, Steve, so much. And let's move to a group. I won't call it a discussion because we're actually close to the top of the hour. But I want to reflect just a little bit on a couple key points. One is hopefully for those that aren't already part of our 30 by 30 movement, this hour has given you some indication of all that we're working to do and some of the progress that we're making. It's a comprehensive effort and it's an ambitious one. We need to improve conservation. We need to protect, as Jen said, over 5 million acres of additional land across our state. We need to double the amount of durably protected state waters. So this is going to take continued and building momentum. So I'll say, if you're not already part of our 30 by 30 effort, please plug in. Geeta's going to put a couple of important, or at least one important link within the chat to find out more. At the very least, join our newsletter. And if you're already engaged in an intense way, thank you. I mean, the progress that we're making is remarkable. We could spend a lot of time just on the specific projects that added up to all of that acreage progress. But that being said, want to ask anybody as we close out here, in a sentence, what are you either looking forward to in the next year, or what's a request of people that are tuning in here today? And I'll pick on one of my colleagues, Jen first.
I just want to see all of the people that are not on our mailing list get on our mailing list and help us make this work happen. We need all of you and all of us. So thanks for tuning in and please join our effort.
Jen.
And yes, I will say the same. And we're really looking forward to getting out with increased engagement and community participation and really digging into some of the science questions that we have. So please stay tuned on places for and opportunities for engagement and to learn more.
Great. Over to Annie.
I'd say that 30 by 30 gives me a lot of hope because it's a tailwind instead of a headwind. And it doesn't mean that all the details and all the things are perfectly figured out and there's not a dialed plan for all the things. What it means is that we're all using the same language and moving in the same direction and figuring it out together. And that gives me a lot of hope.
Thank you. Chairman Davis, what are you looking forward to?
It's closing the deal on our 10,000 acre land acquisition on the Pine Creek tracts. So that'll give us the ability to do all the work that I mentioned in a new area of our ancestral territory.
We're really excited about continuing to support that effort. Thank you. Over to you, Angie.
Yeah, absolutely. When we think about forest health and forest resilience as foundational, we also know we need to be working at a much larger scale and we need to be building capacity across our region so that we can operate at the tens of thousands of acres. Once we have funding to do forest health at that level, I'm really looking forward to finding ways to integrate other sources of funding so that we really are thinking holistically about how we're addressing resilience on those large landscapes.
Wow. Back over to you, Steve.
Bigger and better partnerships to achieve targeted outcomes for 30. Yeah.
I love it. And then to close us out, Juan, you're a pastor. Help provide the benediction with a little bit of inspiration as we conclude the discussion.
Perfect. Where else in the planet can you go watch the sunrise and have breakfast in Joshua Tree, then drive yourself up to Big Bear and snowboard for lunch? Then if you plan it out right, go down to one of our local beaches and surf the sunset. California needs to be protected, and 30 by 30 is not the end, it's the start of something great.
Incredible. Well, thank you as leaders. Thank you all for tuning in and for your engagement, for your leadership in your own community, in your own neck of the woods, advancing environmental conservation, helping us get to 30 by 30. So much good work to come. This video, this discussion will be recorded as a video. So if you check back on our California Natural Resources Agency website over the next couple of days, you'll find a recording with all of our Secretary Speaker series. And if you have any follow-up questions or suggestions for us about other discussions we should be having in this format, please hit us up at the email provided on the slide. Thanks so much and have a great week. And hopefully we'll see you all again soon. Take care.